This is unreal. Right now, they're playing 5D chess, 6D chess, dare I say. That's the level where they're at right now. I don't even know if the streamers recognize what happened to them.
Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. A couple of days ago we had a bit of a show match between the Riot devs for Valorant and a couple of ex-CS pros that are well-known streamers nowadays, people like Shroud, Summit, Flom, those kind of people. A lot of people assume that these players would end up beating the devs, but the devs not only absolutely destroyed the streamers, but really showed how far Valorant could go with some of the abilities, usage, and what peak Valorant looks like. This video could not have happened without Golden Boy's observing of the game and casting, so big shout out to him. Go definitely watch him on Twitch, especially for the fact that he has drops enabled, allowing you a chance to get into the beta of Valorant that's going on currently. You can also watch myself and Miska, all of the details are in the description below, but let's get started into the first clip. The streamers versus devs went over 3 different maps starting on Bind, and literally the first round showed exactly some of the crazy stuff that you could do within this game shown by Volcano. He was playing Raze, who is a pretty strong character in her own right, not really too much to talk about there. The streamers were pushing through Hookah on Bind and they were actually hit by a paint shell grenade, killing 3 of them. The interesting thing about this is this came from A site, as that is where Volcano is holding, and he did this by throwing the paint shell through the teleporter. A lot of people didn't actually know that you could fire objects through there, and it doesn't play the notification sound of somebody using a teleporter. In fact, it's a different sound altogether. This plays even cooler when you realize that the devs used Cyber Cage on this corner, which makes a sound when enemies go into it and out of it. So they had a good audio cue that they were in this area of the map, allowing Volcano to line up his grenade and actually kill 3 of them. The fact is that this didn't happen once, it happened twice. 2 rounds later, the streamers are pushing through Hookah again, and guess what happens? Volcano gets the paint shell grenade in again and kills 3 of them. Actually ridiculous play. A lot of people, I guess, would assume that the devs aren't very good at their own game. A lot of them are ex-CS pro players, people like Volcano, Xcal, Nikwu, all of previous professional experience in the FPS genre at least. So when it came to aim and mechanics, they were like for like at least. But how the devs used their utility and how they played around the map and used coordination to their advantage made this an absolute stomp on their side. Here's another excellent clip to show it off. Not only do we have Nikwu doing an amazing lineup recon bolt, as you can see on the minimap, it's actually landed right by where the teleporter is on the A side, where there is actually a couple of the attacking streamers holding. But this is made even better with Xcal, who's playing Phoenix by the way, using Run It Back, his ultimate that respawns him after a certain amount of time. He pops his ultimate from B site, uses the teleporter to go over to A, him dueling with one of the streamers, killing them, going to fight another one, and then Run It Back pulls him all the way back to B site, which is important because the teleport that was used is only one way. So this is a great way to get a cheeky pick and then go out to safety. And just the lineup with the recon bolt and his ultimate being used goes to show how coordination and utility can be used in a really exciting fashion. As the games went on, the streamers got a lot more used to playing against Riot. They did lose the first match pretty hard, so they wanted to give their all into the next map, Haven. The first clip I want to show some really patient play with Volcano playing Raze again. For a start, you could see that the Cypher has hold of the spike and he's not really pushing towards any site. In fact, they're taking up a lot of mid ground and Volcano gets a pick onto A. Instead of everybody rushing onto that site, Volcano uses the blast pack to get a nice spot on top of the boxes to check out the site to see where people are. And it actually sends Summit, who's playing Breach on the A site, into a bit of a frenzy. Whilst Volcano's just patiently waiting for something to happen, Summit blows all of his utility, even using his ultimate, which doesn't hit anybody as they're not pushing through yet. Absolutely no rushing happened. Nikwu's playing Silver again and fires a recon bolt that shows up exactly where Summit is. We don't get to see the perspective of this happening, but Volcano comes in, uses the blast pack to get some extra height and kills Summit, and then that's where the rush comes through. And immediately, while NTT is planting, everybody else is flushing out to try and find where the last of the defenders are in order to kill them, to make sure that they don't keep or save any guns. I think a lot of people nowadays are just going, oh, let's rush C, let's rush B, let's rush A, let's just go somewhere very quickly, especially if they get a pick. But this just goes to show that a round like this, patient play is not only good for just taking your time and weighing up your options, but if you can get the enemy to waste their utility like Summit did on Breach, it just makes your job of taking the site a hell of a lot easier. Now when it comes to Brimstone and his ultimate orbital strike, there isn't too much really to look at. It's just just a lot of damage that can be thrown down in a big area, but because of how easy it is to telegraph and how easy it is to spot it happening, it means that you don't really get an awful lot of kills for it. But that's really okay for Penguin and the rest of the Riot team that actually don't use it in this fashion at all. Again, similar to before, they're sort of holding mid, not really dedicating to a site too early. They start leaning towards C, and Nikwu gets a nice little bit of scout onto what the front of the C site looks like, but of course they can't necessarily see if there's anybody around this corner. Up until now, the devs have taken their time, but then Penguin uses Orbital Strike onto this corner, and then the tempo of the play actually comes up. They go from sneaking around in double doors to absolutely running full pelt onto C, maybe even using Orbital Strike to cover their sound a little bit, but I just want to highlight the ultimate being used in a spot that they can't really cover, and whilst they're using Orbital Strike, you just see NTT and the rest rushing out towards CT where the enemies actually are. There's another time where this happens too. Silver fires out a recon ball to try and scout out the site, and Orbital Strike again is used as a nice go ability on an area where Penguin can't necessarily see as he's pushing. Because of that, it forces Shroud, who's playing Sage, into a really odd predicament, and he gets killed in the back by NTT. Again, just look at the minimap, slow pushing, and then Orbital Strike comes out, and then he immediately wrap onto the point and plant. I really like the idea of Orbital Strike just being used as a tempo play, more than something that's useful for actually getting picks. It's just great at clearing out an area that you can't necessarily see, that people could be camping, and if it doesn't catch anybody, that's fine. You don't need to worry about that area at all. Now here's just a solid amazing play. It's a 2v2, the devs have planted onto C site, Summit and Shroud are trying to go for a retake to try and defuse the spike. They roughly know where Volcano is on the raise, but they weren't expecting this, as the ultimate gets used to Showstopper, which is a massive rocket launcher. Blast Pack fires Volcano up into the air, kills Summit and is able to follow up by killing Shroud too. Not really too much to break down, it was just really awesome to watch. Here's a nice little bit of tech actually that I think more people should be aware of and using as much as they possibly can. Volcano wins a 1v1 with Dizzy, and Dizzy was actually using the Vandal rifle, one of the strongest rifles in the game. So this is a really strong gun that's been left on the ground towards where the streamers, the defending team, are kind of holding. So Volcano actually juggles his own gun as well as Dizzy's Vandal to an area that it's not so easy for the defenders to try and take that gun if they need to. This is just a great way of denying guns and weaponry from the other team. It might not seem like much, but I think a lot of plays like that, especially in rounds where you have the advantage with economy, is a great way to starve the enemy team from using any gun and having every disadvantage in that particular round. Next up, the streamers actually do win this round, but I did want to highlight this amazing retake recon bolt that came out of Nikwu that pretty much shows up exactly where everybody is. Unfortunately, Flom finds his aim and manages to headshot 2 people in a row, killing 3 total in a round. Another little bit of tech that I think again is worth highlighting that people should be more aware of: every time that you defuse a spike, you actually gain a point towards your ultimate. Here Xcal starts defusing it, gets it to halfway, and actually lets Nikwu on the Silver finish it off. Xcal clearly doesn't care too much about using Jet for the ultimate, and thinks it's much better for Silver to be farming towards his Hunter's Fury ult than her to have Bladestorm. I'm not necessarily sure which ults are the best right now, but having characters like Raze having their ultimate up as much as possible, I think is a lot more beneficial than a Jet having hers. And the final play that I wanted to highlight from this round with Haven actually comes from the final round itself, and this is again another amazing play out of Nikwu. You can see on the minimap that he's in this bit of corner between B and C, and what he's actually doing is lining up this shot, this recon bolt. He fires it and it hits just around the spawn garden area for the attacking team, the streamers, and it shows up exactly where Flom is, to the point that Nikwu actually takes a chance using his Hunter's Fury ultimate and actually kills Flom. So that intel allowing a pick straight away onto the streamers within 5 seconds. I mentioned before how Brimstone's ult was used as a way to rush onto a certain area of the map, and this is no exception here as we move on to Split and looking at NTT. He's holding mid, so he's not necessarily pushing a site himself, but instead he uses Orbital Strike onto the high ground, this heaven area, and you can see how quickly the rest of his team decide to rush that angle and actually rush it to a point where they get a kill onto Scar. Just a slow play waiting for a push, Orbital Strike comes out and immediately they're onto the site with characters like Phoenix and Jet leading the line. Phoenix even uses his ultimate, so Volcano again using it aggressively and actually allows him to get that pick in the first place. But they actually do this again. Instead of using Brimstone's ultimate, we actually see Nikwu using Hunter's Fury. You can see where he stood, you can hear that he used his ultimate, and he's firing it across this area that actually makes the streamer defenders back out a little bit. And in that time, Phoenix, Jet, and Sage rush up to ramp. and again take that position and take that ground. I also did want to highlight the fact that the spike wasn't taken with them, so if they do all die because of a clutch play, they don't need to worry about the spike being stuck in an awkward spot. In fact, Nikwu's going to pick it up and lag behind a little bit, as the spike doesn't necessarily need to be with the attackers to begin with. It's just nice micromanagement, I suppose, being able to use the ultimate to take space and also make sure that the spike does get picked up and not left in a really awkward spot for them to try and take later on. If you want to see where Nikwu was holding when he used Hunter's Fury, he actually uses it again. But first we see another nice lineup for the recon bolt, shows where the Brimstone is, and decides again to have a gander with his ultimate to try and get a pick. Doesn't do so, but again in that time, the duelist characters of Jet and Phoenix are ready to rush whoever's there and try and clear out the site at the same time. Overall, plays like this enabled the devs to win hands down very easily. People like Shroud really enjoyed the experience, I suppose, of being shut down by devs, being able to play their game to this higher level. And like I said, some of these have previous experience in pro games like CS Source 1.6. Volcano is obviously a very well-known person within the Counter-Strike community, not only being a pro, but also creating maps like Cash. I'm pretty sure that's mentioned every time that Volcano's name is mentioned too, but they know what they're doing, which I think is a huge help to a game and making sure that the competitive integrity of Valorant stays somewhat high. When it came to guns, the devs actually preferred using Phantoms overall than the Vandals, which I found really interesting. I think a lot of people assume that the Vandal is just outright better, but I think there's a lot of situations where you might want to pick up the Phantom for its higher fire rate and just how it works close quarters. It is personal preference at the end of the day, but I did find it interesting that the devs almost exclusively used the Phantom gun over the Vandal. Certainly worth bearing in mind, but also the characters that were used by the devs too. I wouldn't necessarily say that they were tryharding too hard in regards to what characters that they picked up, but characters like Cypher and Silver saw a lot more playtime than I guess most people were anticipating. Characters like Brimstone, Raze especially, Phoenix and Jet, you could kind of understand why they're there with how aggressive and how their utility can be used both on attack and defense, but a lot of people kind of assumed that Silver and Cypher just weren't going to be as good. We saw hands down exactly why Silver is so good in hands of players like Nikwu. Having that information, that intel seems to be a lot more important than having other abilities that could do similar stuff, but also Cypher. I think a lot of people just think the Cypher isn't as good as some of the other characters, but watching NTT play them on Bind and Haven was a great demonstration on how this character can be used. Even in areas like this, the first setup on the first game, I was really interested in how NTT set up most of his utility onto the B site, setting up his camera there too, and then holds A, and it makes a lot of sense. It means that he can have intel to where people can be and still be on A site making up the numbers too, because for the most part you tend to run 3 people on Bind on the A site and then 2 people on B. So having a camera on B just adds a little bit more firepower to that side if they need it. But overall, I was super impressed by the devs. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to show people what decent Valorant can look like. Obviously people are going to get better over time, but this is just a great way to show the depth that this game has overall and how far some of these characters can be pushed and some of the cool tech that you can do too. And if you have 2 teams playing like this, the pro/esports scene of Valorant going forward is going to be super fun to watch, and I'm so excited to see what this game could do. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, take care, we'll see you next time.